Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Side Project Volunteer Orientation for New Lawyers. My name is Jeff Fromneck, and I'm the Managing Attorney of Side Project, and I'm going to be leading us through a quick agenda today to try to orient you guys not only to Side Project and our volunteer process, but also to give you guys an overview of the work that you're going to be doing, that, helping us with our compliance reviews and reviewing some common compliance issues. We're also going to be discussing what our next steps are to get you guys started volunteering. So just for a few minutes, I want to talk about Side Project. We like everyone to know about what we do and to be able to tell other people about what we do and sort of to know and understand our elevator speech. So basically, our elevator pitch is that we're a nonprofit whose mission is to promote social justice and social change by incubating and developing grassroots projects. So we work with nonprofits with budgets less than $5 million, although most of our clients and most of our work have been with organizations that have budgets less than $100,000. As you can see here, last year in 2017, we provided over 3,500 hours of pro bono and low bono legal services to these small and startup nonprofits. We house 12 projects in-house. These projects are all focused on some type of social justice issue. And we also hosted 7 workshops or webinars on legal and compliance issues for nonprofits. Those were held in Pittsburgh as well as in Palm Beach County, Florida. You can see by the numbers, we've been around for 5 years. This graph shows the last 3 years of some of our major impact. And you can see our volunteers have stayed pretty steady. We've consistently worked with more projects each year. Last year, we worked with 50 individual nonprofits or would-be nonprofits. And you can see that our revenue has grown substantially over time. And a lot of that revenue growth is from our work incubating new projects that come under our umbrella and are able then to fundraise and do fundraise to carry out their mission. This is the second part of our 2017 infographic, and this goes over our core program, our nonprofit incubator program. We provide incubation in 3 different ways: through fiscal sponsorship. Those are the projects that come under our corporate umbrella. We also provide general counsel legal support. That's where you guys come into play. And we also provide technical assistance with operational challenges, helping groups to put in various strategies and plans that then their project and their volunteers are responsible for carrying out. If we needed to summarize sort of the genesis behind Side Project and why we do what we do, I think it's summarized, in the words of Margaret Mead, that we believe in the power of small groups of thoughtful, committed citizens to change the world and to change their community. We think that that's one of the only ways that true social change happens, is when people get involved and get active. And so we created Side Project to be a support to those individuals who are putting themselves out there and trying to make their community or their world a better place. We have operations in Florida and Pennsylvania, and you can see we have a number of volunteers in both places. Now, we recruit an eclectic group of volunteers that help out in whatever way that they can. So based on their professional discipline or their experiences or their expertise, they lend that to the various nonprofits that we support or to Side Project ourselves. Nonprofits are just like any other business. They need help with, in addition to legal help, they need help with accounting, marketing, development, management, everything. So we try to recruit an eclectic blend of different young professionals or young at heart professionals that want to give back. We're governed by a board of directors, and you can see the list there. The majority of the board are lawyers, although they're not all lawyers. It's not a requirement to serve on the board. Our board is made up of people that have served on our Action Advisory Committee, and we encourage you, if that's something you're interested in and taking more of a leadership role in Side Project, we certainly encourage you to let us know that. We're always looking for good board members. And then lastly, but probably most importantly, the reason we do the work we do is to try and advance a set of values that we believe in, and we, being the board and other volunteers, that we believe are important to a community that is safe and welcoming and successful. So, those values are listed there and a little description of each of them. And all the projects and all of the clients that we work with advance one or more of those values in some way, shape, or form. Volunteering at Side Project, we try to make volunteering as easy as possible, and we try to base it on your schedule and also sort of your interests. So, this slide goes through the different steps. We're in step 1 right now. We're going through the orientation, and we're going to provide you, we sent you an email with some information to review. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out. We will be sharing some additional information on Basecamp, and we have a variety of other resources we can share as well. The next step is going to be to follow up with a call with me. I'm the volunteer coordinator, to discuss your interests and then to assign you to 1 to 3 nonprofits that you're going to provide support for. I think everyone on this group is going to start off with 1 nonprofit. We'll see how it goes. If you like it and you have more time and you want to take on more than 1, that's fine. But we suggest everyone starts with 1 just to get started. After that, we're going to complete the annual compliance interview, and your role in that is going to be based on how you want to help. You can take the lead, or you can take second chair and help assist with the interview. From there, we're then going to work together to develop a compliance strategy for this organization. We'll document that in Basecamp, and then over the next few months, we're going to execute on that strategy, and you'll plug in as your time allows. This is a summary of what I just talked about, but for 2018 and for this batch of volunteers, we're focusing in on compliance reviews. And so there's 3 major tasks involved in that, the first being the actual compliance review, and we're going to go through that in the next couple slides. The opportunities for you to participate there are to conduct the interview, to assist with the interview, or if you're not able to do either of those, you can get briefed on the findings of the interview and then work on the second and third tasks. The second task is develop a compliance strategy. So we'll review the annual compliance interview results, and we'll identify areas that need follow-up, and then we'll develop a plan as to how we're going to do that. And while we're developing the plan, we will assign roles to different people. And so you'll take on as much or as little as you're capable of, and it's going to be spaced out over the course of the year. And then third is to help execute the plan. And so that's going to be where you're helping us, whether it's draft a corporate policy, maybe you're reviewing or drafting a contract, or reviewing an insurance quote. Some groups help the organization implement a new policy or procedure. It's really going to be based on what the organization needs and what you're interested and comfortable working with. And no matter which you choose, we're going to provide you with support and resources to get through whatever you're helping with. All right, so Basecamp is how we manage all of our projects. And so we're going to switch over now to Basecamp so I can show you guys what it looks like. And everyone will get an invitation after this call to join Basecamp. And you're going to see that the project pages are going to all look like this. You're going to have some to-dos. And this is where we're going to outline the compliance plan. So you can see for the Art Barn Foundation, there are already some items in here. They're going to have their tax return due May 15th. They may have an annual report due with the PA Department of State. They'll have their charitable registration requirements due November 15th. And at this point, that's really all they have. So then you go back to the beginning by clicking there. We use the message board to post notes of interactions you may have with the client. You can see this client has been pretty easy. They haven't had a lot of issues come up. The compliance calendar is going to have a list of all the important dates, and this is going to be a part of the work that we do as volunteers, is going to be to update this compliance calendar. We also will host a number of documents and files here. This is going to be, again, part of the work is to make sure that these documents are up to date. You can see here in the corporate e-minute book, every organization is going to have one of these, and it's going to provide the basic information on the organization. So its EIN number, its official name, its mailing address, phone numbers, contact info, and you guys are going to work to keep this up to date. You also will see files on the IRS that'll have some of the filings we completed. You can see the tax determination letter is not in here. So that's something that we're going to have to make sure we have a copy of and that we get here in the file. And then you'll have files for various other agencies or compliance requirements. So here we have the PA Department of State. That we'll probably add some to here with the PA Bureau of Charitable Organizations when it comes to the charitable organization renewals. And then email forwards are any official emails that we get on our behalf of the organization we send here to keep track of. So this is what a project will look like, and then up here at the top is how you navigate. So you guys will have a home screen, and it'll look somewhat like this. It probably won't have as many projects, but you'll be on several teams. So you'll be on the Action Advisory Committee, and you guys will also be on the Legal Services team. And then your projects will be listed here. And so you'll be assigned to, like I said, 1 to 3 nonprofits. They'll show up here. You'll be able to click on and see all of their information. Okay, we're all lawyers, so we are familiar with tracking our time, and volunteering at Side Project is no different. So we utilize a website called Track It Forward to track our volunteers and our volunteers' time. It's kind of fun. You can see different graphs and charts. We've been trying to implement this. Not all of our volunteers are as diligent with it as we would like, but we really highly encourage you to do it. It's how you earn some of the incentives like Side Project t-shirts and golf shirts and some of the different things we have to thank you guys for your time. So please be sure to register through this link. This will also be included in an email we send you. We'll try to send quarterly reminders to do this. But it's important that you guys do it not only for your own tracking purposes, but also for Side Project. Our donors like to know how many volunteers we're able to recruit, and we also report that to the IRS as one of our outcomes. All right, so now we're going to move in to the compliance and sort of the overview part. So as you can see, there are a number of common compliance issues that nonprofits face, and this list is not all-inclusive. These are just some of the issues we deal with. And, so we're going to spend the next 20 minutes or so reviewing these. Now, the intent is for you guys to have a basic level understanding of the issues and some of these rules. But we're not really going to go into an analysis of, the pros and cons of taking different positions when it comes to executive compensation. We're really going to focus on just the bare minimum so that you guys are able to identify potential issues. Our compliance reviews are designed to be information gathering sessions. And so if you're involved in that or you take the lead on that, you're not going to be expected to answer questions on any of these issues. You're going to be asking questions and collecting information that we will then review and identify any potential issues that are going on. So we break it down into state and local issues and then federal issues, and the compliance checklist that I sent you guys sort of tracks this. So we're going to weave in and out of that checklist and just some slides that cover the basic concepts behind the questions over the next 20 minutes or so. So you guys all got a copy of this in advance, but this is what our compliance checklist looks like. So at the top of it, you'll write down the name of the organization. You'll write down your name as the volunteer. You will write down the name and title of the person you're talking to and the date that we conducted this interview. Now, we could do this through a survey, an online survey, or mail this to the client. However, we find that we get a lot more out of it if we have a conversation with the client. And so there's different ways you can do that. And, certainly it'd be okay to read through this question by question, but we really encourage you to let the client talk. And, if you start asking them a question on one thing and they start going into something else, listen long enough to see if it's something that is important, and then maybe, just make a note that you're going to get to it later. But I think it's important, when you're going through this review, is to listen. We're really there to listen. If they ask you specific questions, mark it down in the notes section and let them know that Jeff will get back to them. They're going to understand, and they're going to be prepped that this is not a time to necessarily get answers to questions. This is a time to pose their concerns. So some of these questions we're going to go through, others that are more straightforward, we may just pass over. But, as you're looking at it, the first question, is your organization accurately listed on the Department of State website? This is something that you will do ahead of time. You'll go to whichever appropriate website, and you'll search for the corporation, and you'll have that info so that you can verify it with them. The next set of questions are related basically to the annual report requirement the Department of State has. So in Pennsylvania, you only have to file it if there's any changes made. So we have a number of questions related to, changes to the board, changes to an address or corporate mailing address, change to a registered agent. Those things have to be updated if they've changed with PA. In Florida, you have to update it every year no matter what. The next couple of questions are more corporate formalities. So we want to make sure that the bylaws still accurately describe the corporate purpose, the corporate governance structures, and the procedures that the organization is using. If they're not, we need to amend the bylaws so that they are. Most of these organizations are pretty new, so the bylaws should still work. So I don't anticipate this being a big issue. The next question, though, may be an issue. And that's whether or not they keep or they've kept written minutes of all meetings and board committees. So a lot of organizations we find do not have the best record keeping practices. So we may have to help them recreate some corporate minutes, as well as put together just some annual resolutions that every organization should have. Some additional corporate info that groups should have, but if they don't, we want to make sure they do. A current list of their board members and mailing addresses. Number 7 is pretty important. Most bylaws require this, and that is that the board of directors is presented with and reviews an annual financial statements and a list of program accomplishments for the past fiscal year. Every organization should be doing that. So if they're not, that's something that we need to be made aware of. The annual conflict of interest form is something that Florida requires. Pennsylvania, it's best practice. But this is just a form that certifies that the board members have read and are complying with the conflict of interest policy, and that if they're asked to disclose any potential conflicts that they have. The next 2 questions are important from a variety of perspectives, both on the state and the federal level. Number 9 asks if they have any close working relationships or share any resources with any other nonprofit organizations. This is something that we want to be looking at to see, we want to make sure that they're not engaging in any partnerships, and we want to make sure that any agreements like this are in writing. So if they answer yes to this, follow down, ask them to describe how the relationship works, ask them to describe what the terms of it are, and if the terms of it are in writing. And the next question, number 10, asks if they've worked closely with any for-profit organizations. So this raises quite a number of issues, and this is something that nonprofits have to be careful about. So again, if they answer yes to this, try to gather as much information as possible, but this will definitely be something that I follow up with groups on if they report doing this. There are several more questions here related to the board. So there's going to be limitations both in the conflict of interest policy as well as IRS rules that put special rules in place when there's monetary or business transactions with members of the board of directors. So this question tries to get at, do you have any type of relationship with a member of the board where money is changing hands? If so, we need to know about that. And there are going to be instances where groups answer yes to this. Hopefully, there are situations we've already dealt with. But if not, we want to make sure we're on top of that for our groups. The last 3 questions are related. So these are more just best practice questions. Does the board conduct an annual self-assessment? Does the board have job descriptions? And then lastly, on a scale from 1 to 10, how effective is your board? As you can guess, answers to the first two questions sort of inform the last question usually. But we want to get a sense of what this person, typically you're going to be talking with the executive director or the founder. We want to get a sense of how well their board is working. What we do with groups that are a year or 2 years in is we help them put together a committee structure to delegate responsibilities between the board. So we want to get a sense of how they see their board working. And if their board isn't working, that's something that I'll follow up with them on and guide them through. All right, so this just reviews some of the things we just talked about. So once you're assigned your client, you're going to go to the appropriate website and check their Department of State filing, check their charitable organization filing, check their IRS nonprofit status, make sure that they're public charity status. And then GuideStar is a great resource if you're not familiar with it. It's a private nonprofit, and they make the IRS data that's publicly available very accessible to you and I. You can go onto that website and download a tax return for any nonprofit that's filed one, which is all of them. So they have tax returns for the past 3 years for every group. It's a couple years, delay, so they don't have 2016 up yet, but you can get 15, 14, 13. So this is a good place to go. Make sure the organization's listed on there and review their previous year's tax returns to learn a little bit more about the organization. I want to go over this. A lot of the rules that we're going to talk about, a lot of these compliance issues are based or come out of these various legal responsibilities or duties that the board of directors has to a nonprofit. So these fiduciary duties come from state law. In Pennsylvania, it's the Nonprofit Corporation Statute. In Florida, it's the Florida Nonprofit Corporation Statute. And they impose certain levels of care on members of the board of directors. And they're typically thought of as these three duties: the duty of loyalty, the duty of care, and the duty of obedience. The duty of loyalty, you must act in the best interest of the corporation. Most organizations, all the ones we work with, are going to have a conflict of interest policy that is intended to make sure that board members act in the best interest of the corporation. It's typically going to require that board members that have a competing interest step aside and do not participate in the discussion, debate, or vote on a specific issue. The duty of care is a little bit harder to quantify, but it's basically that you have to put forth reasonable care and diligence when it comes to managing the organization, the same that a person of ordinary prudence would use in similar circumstances. This is, if you are a lawyer serving on a board, you're going to be treated as held to the standard of a lawyer serving on a board. So you want to make sure you have some familiarity with the legal issues that you're dealing with. The duty of care for most organizations is met by documenting and having regular board meetings, reviewing financial records, reviewing program accomplishments, and generally just knowing what's going on with the organization. The cases where boards get into trouble is where they are just asleep at the wheel. They don't have board meetings. There's no financial records being reviewed, and where they know problems exist, but they just choose to ignore it. They stick their head in the sand. So the minimum duty of care is basically that the board is involved and is reviewing documents and knows what's going on with the organization. The duty of obedience is a weird duty, but the idea of it is that the board is responsible for ensuring that the organization conduct programs and conduct activities that are within and consistent with its mission and its tax-exempt purpose. So the board should be the group that's steering the strategic direction of the organization and should be approving and reviewing staff plans for expansion, making sure that you're keeping consistent with your mission and not allowing that mission to creep as the organization may be tempted to chase money or chase grants. These board best practice tips are all included in some way, shape, or form in the questions that we reviewed. So I'm going to let you guys review this slide on your own. All right, moving on to the next issue. Fundraising legal issues are the second biggest issue that nonprofits face. There's a variety of rules that come into play here, from the types of gifts that you receive, whether it's vehicles, cash, houses, stock, whatever it might be, to issues involved with events that you may run. There's going to be a variety of disclosure requirements, whether or not you hold raffles and do other small games of chance. There's legal issues involved with that. And then the big one is the registration. So we're going to see on this next slide, 42 states require organizations that fundraise or solicit funds from the public in that state to register with the state as a charitable organization. Now, this can come into play in a variety of ways now that a lot of fundraising happens on the internet. And so the basic rule of thumb is if an organization is fundraising using just the means of interstate commerce, so they have a website and they have a donate now button, although that can be accessed from anywhere, that doesn't mean they're purposely fundraising in every state. The legal idea behind that is that that's not going to provide a nexus of activity that's going to give the state jurisdiction over that organization. Now that changes as the facts change. So the more an organization does to target a specific state, the greater likelihood that a state may be able to exert jurisdiction over that activity. So if we're going back to the fundraising online and social media, if you launch a fundraiser on your company's Facebook page, and that's it, you just post it, you share it, and people find it, and you get some donors. You're based in Pennsylvania. You get some donors from Ohio, some donors from Virginia, some donors from West Virginia. Does that mean you have to register in each of those states? Probably not. Not at that level. Now that's changed the facts a little bit. Now you launch your campaign, and this time you use Facebook's marketing features, and you specifically target donors, and you pay Facebook to identify donors for you in Ohio, West Virginia, and Virginia. At that point, you're purposely targeting donors in Ohio, West Virginia, and Virginia. And so that would probably trigger the registration requirements. Now you're saying, but wait, we didn't raise any money yet. Well, the rules require you to register if you solicit funds. Now, soliciting funds is the act of asking someone for money. It doesn't matter if you actually get any. So they're not fundraising registration requirements, they're solicitation registration requirements. And a lot of groups will get that confused. We get calls that say, hey, we just got a $10,000 check in Florida. And they're a Pennsylvania organization, do we have to register in Florida? Well, it depends how they got that check, but if someone just mailed it to them and they didn't do anything to really ask for it, probably not. But if they held a campaign in Florida, or they had volunteers that held a 5K and they had signs that said donate to this organization, yeah, probably. So a lot of our clients are registered in Pennsylvania and/or Florida, some of them in multiple states. But this is going to be something that we review on an annual basis. So the first question here is: are you currently registered to solicit charitable donations in each state that you fundraise in or that you solicited? Groups are going to be all over the place with this. You're going to get a lot of people telling you about what they do online. That's fine. Listen to them, write it down. Like I explained, for the most part, it's probably not going to require registration, but it is something we want to monitor and track. Next couple questions on here are pretty straightforward. In Pennsylvania, the Solicitation of Funds Act requires certain reports be submitted that you guys have filled out by a CPA if you raise over a certain amount of funds. So there's a series of questions on here that ask how much was raised in contributions. Contributions are typically thought of as donations, grants. They don't include any fee for service. And so if you're assigned to a Pennsylvania organization, you'll answer, you'll try to get a sense of where they're at. If they don't know the answer to this, indicate that they don't know, but try to get an estimate from them. And these are pretty broad categories. All right, question 7 is an idea called commercial co-ventures. And what that means is the state is going to regulate and you need to disclose anytime a nonprofit enters into a sales promotion with a for-profit business. So what does that look like? Well, let's say you have a brewery or a bar in Pittsburgh, and they have a written agreement with the YMCA that this, whatever weekend, 10% of all the sales of this beer are going to benefit the YMCA. That would be considered a charitable sales promotion, and at the end of the year needs to be disclosed to the Pennsylvania Attorney General. You should also have that, the group should also have those agreements in writing. So they're fairly common agreements and fairly common situations. A lot of times groups don't even realize they have to keep track of it. So we want to get that on their plate. Next one, do they have a current copy of their 501c3 determination letter? They should. If they don't, we can get them one. The next couple of questions are again related to Pennsylvania solicitation law. So if an organization hires any or contracts with any paid fundraisers or professional solicitors or anyone to help them raise money, that's something that there's special rules that govern that. So we need to know that. And so questions 9 and 10 ask, whether or not they have anyone, and if they do, if they're properly registered with the state. Under both Pennsylvania and Florida law, and there are some required disclosures and disclaimers that need to be included on any solicitation. Some of them are pretty basic. You have to have the name of the organization. You have to have sort of what it's going to be benefiting for, and some additional contact info. And that can be presented in any number of ways, and that's usually not an issue. But there's some required language that both Pennsylvania and Florida require that needs to be included on written requests for contributions, including their donation page online. So that's something we want to check in about. If they don't have it, it's certainly going to be something we follow up with them on. All right, the next section on the annual compliance review is a section on risk management. For our clients, our biggest risk management advice is always going to be to get insurance and to have waivers when appropriate. So this section on risk management in your compliance review just goes through these different types of insurances and asks whether or not the groups have them. So, general liability insurance is going to cover typically premise liability, general tort liability. Directors and officers insurance is going to cover the actions or inactions of the board of directors. So it's sometimes referred to as errors and omissions insurance, but it's going to cover the board if they were to be sued because of a decision they made on behalf of the organization. Employment practices liability is going to cover the organization should members of their staff act inappropriately, or if their management acts inappropriately in terms of sexual harassment, discrimination, so on and so forth. Special event coverage is going to apply to any fundraising event or any special event like a walk or a golf tournament or something like that the organization holds off-site or at a premises that isn't covered by its general liability insurance. If the event's going to have alcohol that the organization is providing, we always recommend a liquor liability policy as well. Professional liability may not apply to all of our clients, but certainly any of them that are conducting professional type services like counselors, lawyers, doctors. We're going to want to make sure that they have professional liability insurance in place. Financial practices are again going to be varied depending on the client that you're assigned to. So keep in mind, a lot of these organizations are very small, all volunteer based. So, the first thing we want to know is, do they have a written internal financial control policy? If not, we want to try to get some sense of how they're accounting for their income and their expenses. Do they have an audit committee? Are they maintaining a record of all their expenses and income? Do they prepare quarterly financial statements? This is an area where they may try to ask a lot of questions. Again, just remind them that you're happy to write down the question and take it back to the team to discuss. But this is an area that a lot of our clients struggle with. And once, like a lot of the people that we're going to be working with have been incorporated maybe for a year or two. So now they're starting to get revenue, and some of these things are starting to bubble up that they need to put some processes in place. So this is an important section but it's going to be a section I think you're going to see a lot of no's. Property and sales tax exemption is available in both Pennsylvania and Florida. If a lot of our organizations don't have property, so that's not going to be applicable, but sales tax exemption is something that all of our clients should have. And if they don't, we need to make sure that we get it for them. All right, so we're moving now into some of the IRS compliance issues. The biggest one is that every organization, no matter the size, has to file some type of 990. Some small organizations used to not have to file anything, and that caused a lot of confusion when they changed the rule. But every organization, as of today, has to file some type of 990 tax return or annual filing return. It varies depending on the size of the organization. We're typically going to be working with groups in the first two categories. The 990N is simply 5 or 6 questions and does not require any financial information be submitted. However, organizations still need to keep financial records. So we help out typically with the 990Ns as well as the 990EZs. We're not creating any financial records. Organizations keep those themselves, and then we help them through the form. The rest of these slides track the questions in the annual compliance review, but wanted just to go through some of these ideas again so that you guys understand the general idea and general issue, so that you can identify any potential problems that the group may have. Private benefit transaction is anytime there's a transaction or an agreement between the organization and a director or a director's family member or a business that the director is involved with. These types of transactions are not prohibited, but they must be reasonable. And the IRS has a series of safe harbor provisions that allow organizations to engage in these transactions. If they go through a specified procedure and have some documentation in place, there's a rebuttable presumption that it's okay. But we need to know about these. And they're more common than you think. I mean, the most common one is organization rents office space from a board member, and that's completely okay. It just needs to be at market value. That board member needs to not be involved in the discussion, debate, or vote, and it needs to all be documented very cleanly. Executive compensation is probably the second most common private benefit transaction, because any officer of the corporation is going to be subject to these private benefit rules. And again, it's not that you can't do it. It's just that if you do it, you want to make sure you're following the safe harbor provisions. So we have some questions on the checklist about, how they're doing their executive compensation. We do this for a lot of our clients. So the questions are going to be more probably geared at, are you planning on hiring anyone else? They are going to have this in place for their current executive director, but some might not. And so that's why we're doing this annual review. All right, unrelated business income is an area, there's some areas that are simple, like the annual report. Unrelated business income is not one of those areas. It's deep water. There's lots of potential pitfalls here. But the basic idea, and we need to know for purposes of this compliance review, are they engaged in any type of trade or business? And a trade or business is anything that generates revenue. And so we want to know that. But the rule is that they're going to be taxed on that if it's regularly carried on and unrelated to their organization's exempt purpose. We want to know about any type of trade or business because we're going to help put documentation in place to have the organization have a defendable position that it either isn't regularly conducted or that it is substantially related to the organization's mission. A lot of lawyers will say, well, everything's related because it brings in revenue. Well, the IRS specifically exempts that purpose from one of the allowed purposes. So just because it brings in money for the organization is not enough. It has to have a direct impact on the mission of the organization. So the example I like to use here is with a hospital. So if we think about a hospital, they have a number of different businesses within a hospital. One of them is to provide medical care to sick people. And they bill insurance companies for that, and they make money on it. That is certainly a regularly carried on trade or business. How that happens to be directly related to the hospital's mission of taking care of sick people. Now, the hospital also is going to run, so they don't have to pay taxes on that. The hospital also is going to typically run a gift shop. They're going to sell candy bars, gum, sodas, cards, magazines, books, whatever. That, again, is a trade or business. If it's open on a regular basis, it's regularly carried on. And that is unrelated to the organization's mission. So their mission is to provide healthcare, not to provide snacks and candy. So the revenue that they make from their gift shop is typically going to be taxed as unrelated business income. Now they'll be able to take corresponding deductions, and at that point, it's just treated like a non-exempt corporation's taxes. So there's lots of exceptions and exemptions to this UBIT tax. So this is something that we review for all of our clients on an annual basis. We try to help engage with them in some planning efforts to avoid it if possible, and if not, to reduce potential liability if that's possible. Political campaign activity is the next section on the review, and this is broken down kind of into a couple different ideas. But the first idea is pretty simple. The IRS completely prohibits partisan political activity. So a nonprofit cannot support or oppose a candidate for office for any level of government, from a school board campaign or a city commissioner's office all the way up to the President of the United States. Nonprofits should be apolitical. They shouldn't spend any of their time, money, or resources engaged in partisan politics. So we have a question on there whether or not they do. Hopefully they answer that no. If they answer that yes, it's something we need to look at. Groups can, however, engage in lobbying or advocacy. So lobbying or advocacy is any attempt to influence legislation. Issue-based advocacy is okay. Voter education is okay. It just can't constitute a substantial part of the nonprofit's activities. And again, we're not going to get into the weeds of this. What's important for purposes of this compliance review is to know whether or not they do it and to get some information on how much time and resources are used to do it. Groups can also engage in nonpartisan political activity like voter education or registration or get out and vote drives. Again, we need to know about it so we can make sure that they're structuring these activities to be as nonpartisan as possible, and that they're documenting that and documenting sort of how much they're spending on these activities so that they can justify that to the IRS. Many of our organizations do not have employees. So this is going to be a section that's more or less skipped. But for the organizations that do, there's a lot of legal issues involved. And so we don't expect any of our volunteers to be experts on employment issues. If you are, that's great. Let's talk more. We can probably refer you some work. But for our purposes of this compliance review, we're just going to ask them, do they have employees and do they have any of these policies? And if they're not sure, just write not sure and we'll follow up with them. Once a group gets to the stage where they have employees, it's time to really ramp up their compliance with these rules. We usually try to do this a few months ahead of time, but not all of our clients are as good as we'd like with updating us. So we do it as quickly as possible once they do inform us. So we just didn't want to see where they're at. Like I mentioned, there's a number of issues. And so these questions on here just go through that. Remind the person that we're here to help and this isn't meant to scare them, but if they're going to have employees, they want to make sure that they are compliant with all of these rules because there's a lot of potential liability there. Intellectual property is something that we ask a few questions about. We don't handle any intellectual property issues. We refer that out to a variety of different lawyers, and if some of you guys do that type of work, we'd be happy to include you on our referral list. But we do want to at least get some basic information from these groups. We're not as concerned with trademarks or copyrights. Most of our clients, they don't have any intellectual property and they don't have any trademarks that really have any value. We're more concerned about is infringing on someone else's copyright. And so we have some questions on there about ensuring that they have permission to use any media that they are currently using on their website or in promotional videos or in any promotional materials. So that's a question that is going to be new to some of our organizations. I think there's an idea out there that, hey, we found it online, it must be public use or fair use, whatever, and they go from there. It's not. There's statutory damages that can be in place here. So there are lawyers out there that sort of troll and look for copyright infringement. So we're going to be conducting some more thorough reviews of this for clients that indicate that they may have some images that they don't have permission to use. All right, and then the last part of our survey is on inclusion and diversity. So this is around ADA compliance. Again, these are just yes or no questions. We're not expecting you guys to be experts in the ADA. If they're not sure, write not sure, and we'll follow up with them. We also want to make sure that they have anti-discrimination policies in place. These are usually pretty simple, paragraph-long policy that just says they don't discriminate on the basis of any protected class. So race, gender, age, disability status. They can add in their sexual orientation or sexual identity if they choose. So we want to make sure they have those in place, whether or not they have employees. Just in general, that's a good thing to have. All right, almost lastly, but these are some additional publications that the IRS has. I sent you guys already publication 557, which is tax exempt status for your organization. It's sort of an overview. But these are other publications that deal with some of these various issues. You can see there's one on unrelated business income. There's some on disclosure requirements. So this is going to be a resource for you, again, depending on what your client needs and what you're helping out with. We may refer you to one of these publications. All right, so lastly, want to just review next steps. I'm going to ask all of you that you email me to schedule a meeting where we're going to talk about what you're interested in terms of both from a social perspective, what causes and things you want to support, as well as what types of issues you want to handle from a legal perspective. We're going to then assign you to the nonprofit. We'll brief you on that organization. We'll get you set up on Basecamp. You'll have a chance to review all the files, and then we'll determine how we're going to do the compliance review. I'd like everyone to be involved at least, in a second chair capacity, listening in to the review and, asking questions where you see appropriate. But we'll plan that out ahead of time. If you haven't already, please send me back your signed volunteer job descriptions. And then again, I'm going to remind everyone to register with the time tracking website. So I'm going to look for emails from all of you. For the next few weeks, to have a chance to spend 20, 30 minutes on the phone to update you or to brief you on your organization and to get a sense of how you want to help. If I don't hear from you guys the next few weeks, I will reach out because we want to try to get all this started first quarter so that then we have second and third quarter to work on the plan. All right, I thank you guys all for your time. If you guys have any follow-up questions or want additional information on any of the issues that we talked about, please feel free to reach out and we can provide that. You're going to see in Basecamp, there's some links to some additional resources as well. So we're going to try to provide you with as much support as you want and need to work on these different issues. So I thank you guys again and looking forward to working with you.